So next up, a very interesting gentleman indeed. He reminded me this morning that we are all kings or queens. I'd like to welcome to the stage the founder and CEO of the Brand Leadership Group, the founder and chairman of Brand Africa, the deputy chairman of South African Tourism, and the chairman of Brand Finance Africa. Mr. Thebe Ikalafeng is arguably the foremost global African brand and reputation architect, advisor, and author. He landed this morning from Durban, and we're very grateful to have him here today. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
I think just to let you know, Mr. Ikalafeng is going to be talking on the value of a brand. How can utilities change customer mindset and value perception? He's going to give us a helicopter view and talk about delivering on the promise. Thank you so much.
Good morning. I hear you had a very interesting day yesterday morning, so I brought my, just in case. Because I thought, I'm not going to be harassed out of here. So I have to defend myself. I hope you guys had an awesome morning. So our problems as a continent, as you know very well, started in 1884, 1885. A bunch of white guys hung around in Belgium and they started talking about your continent, dishing it up into little pieces into what they want to do with the continent. And then, of course, when they started coming to visit here, they said, oh my goodness, this continent has got animals everywhere. We need to discover these animals. And they said, oh, and the people are interesting. So I saw this as I was leaving my hotel in Maputo. And I said, no. We are not primitive, we are creative. We think out of the box. They look at the continent and says, this continent is fights everywhere. It's massacres, it's poverty, it's war. It's a continent of war. And they said, Africa's wars are unending. It's a hopeless continent. And I said, of course, all other continents are just as hopeless. Take a minute. So we are not as bad as they say about us, isn't it? Because things change over time. I love this picture. I picked it up many years ago, and I looked at the picture. I'm like, goodness. So black people will never ever baboons, because I don't see anyone there who's evolved. So I'm not going to be listening to anybody calling us names anymore. But our continent has changed, hasn't it? Now everybody says Africa is rising. We are not fighting anybody anymore. We are growing. I was speaking to my brother from Uganda. I was explaining to him that I was in Uganda a couple of months ago, and I was sitting with one of the ministers. I'm not going to mention names. And the minister says to me, Thebe, here in Uganda, you just look at a woman and the woman gets pregnant. Says, we make babies here. So you can imagine. So this statistic is not a big deal to us Africans, because we know we can create people all the time. And we are urbanizing. That 2050, they say 62% of us will be out of those shacks. We'll be living right next door to this ICC, because that's just how we roll. And they say our cities are very, very attractive. Everybody wants to put money into our cities, from Cape to Cairo. And the 10 most competitive African nations, you can see from a country as small as Mauritius, everybody now wants to be in Mauritius. I don't know how many people live in Mauritius. I think 3 or 4. But I'll tell you right now, it's just like our Dubai. Everybody there is a foreigner, but the foreigners there are welcome as long as they are African. And everybody just wants to eat in our continent, don't they? They are here to chop at our continent. But I'll tell you what we need to do. We need to do what Thabo Mbeki said. Thabo Mbeki says, out of this changing continent must come modern products of human economic activity, significant contribution of the world of knowledge in the arts, the science, technology. We need to show images of an Africa that is at peace and prosperity. So you can imagine what we are doing as Africans now with our institutions. We are creating multinationals now. We are creating businesses which are now serving Africans. Every year for the last 5 years, I've conducted this survey across the continent to try and understand what are Africa's most admired brands, or what are the most admired brands in Africa. Problem we have is this year, 17% of the brands that Africans admire are non-African. So how are we going to change the continent if we don't like our own products? Our job is to create great brands which we admire, the same way that we admire the world's greatest brands. Because if you look at where we're putting our money, where the brands that we admire, the brands which we admire are, none of them are in the utilities. Because all you see, the great brands, telecommunications, because Africans like to talk. So that's why I think telecoms is one of the biggest electronics. That's where we are. And beverages, we are talking, we are drinking, we are dressing up. That's what we're doing, and none of them are made in Africa. You know, Forbes put out a list of the top 10 most innovative companies. It's not quite scientific, the list, but nonetheless, it's quite instructive. If you look at the top 10 most competitive, most innovative brands in companies in Africa, Safaricom, telecommunications, Nando's, food, Nation Media, talk, MTN, talk, Econet, talk, Iroko, talk, Woolworths, food, Pick and Pay, food, East Africa, drink. Number 10, famous brands. That's all we do, Africans. We just wake up, we eat, and we talk, and we watch TV. We need to build some great brands that are going to change this continent. And we need to stop blaming. We need to stop begging. We need to stop borrowing. Because how are we going to transform the economy of the continent if we spend all our money, if we spend other people's money? Because then all we do is spend the entire incomes of the countries paying back on interest. Our job, our responsibility is to brand. We need to build great brands as Africans. And if you look at if you look at some of the top 10 industries in Africa, where Africa is now, the diversity of the economy of Africa, utilities are there somewhere. Without utilities, how are we going to drive the economy? Because I think utilities are like the blood of the economy. Other people say, no, it's telecommunications, it's financial services. To me, it's financial services, telecommunications, they're there, right there, between the two of them. Because imagine if your toilet gets clogged up. Imagine if there are no lights in your house, in your business. How are you going to move forward as a continent? Branding is an important vehicle for us to build a continent. You know, as Forbes said in 1997, in the 21st century, branding will be the only unique differentiator between companies, between countries, between people. So people sitting here probably says, but what is a brand? Because I know all of us who don't come from the practice, when somebody comes and says, we're building a brand, they says, can I see my logo? Because to all of us, a brand is a logo. Because we want to see the logo and we want to see it bigger. But if you're an African like me, you know what we do with these brands when we get them. You know, for us, we take a used book from a telecommunications company, from a phone book. You know, people talk. I was listening to Justin talking about recycling, all those things. It's how we are, folks. We've been recycling all our lives. It goes from telecom to the toilet, and it works just fine. Just how we work. Why we love branding, we love it for this reason. I don't understand. Starbucks goes to Ethiopia, buys coffee for 20 cents, goes to America, slaps a Starbucks logo, and sells it back to us for $3.25 just for a cup. You must see us lining up. But if an African does that, we don't do that. Because to us, we think a brand is just a logo. Let me explain to you what brands are. I'm going to use an example of the city we're in. What a beautiful city. Jacob Zuma was speaking yesterday, President Zuma was speaking yesterday, and he said what he learned from the Minister of Tourism from Uganda. I think it's Uganda Day today. From Minister of Tourism from Uganda a few years ago, he said he explained to him that Uganda is a beautiful country because on the seventh day when God rested, he created, when God finished creating all the other countries, he came to Uganda to finish the work, to create a beautiful Uganda. And he says, guess where he went afterwards? Came to Cape Town to rest. So this city used to have a beautiful proposition. This city works for you, they used to say. Folks, when you hear this city works for you, you can imagine what it means for other people. Oh, Table Mountain, I can get married on the beach. What a beautiful city. You can imagine for the guy who lives in the shacks, who doesn't have the same view of the city, because to them, the city works for a few. Be careful the promises that you make, because those promises becomes how you get held accountable. Do you know, the city of Joburg, they used to go out there and says, imagine a city where you can rest assured knowing that it is financially stable, that there is ongoing electrification of homes, utilities, a city that's saving the environment through different energy efficient interventions, a city that continues to create new jobs despite the economic downturn. Can you imagine living in such a city? Then somebody took them to court and says, prove to us you are a world-class city. Because you cannot be a world-class city when the robots don't work, when not everybody gets electricity, when the garbage doesn't get picked up on time. This story made it all the way up to The Guardian. Be careful the promises that you make, because they say this city is not a world-class city if it doesn't deliver on its promises. A brand is a promise made and a promise delivered. Because as the founder of FedEx said, Fred Smith, at the end of the day, FedEx is not the company logo, the advertising, or the sales force. FedEx is the man who pitches up at the hour that you've asked him to deliver your package and never lets you down. That's what a brand is. That's what a brand is. And a brand is everything. It is the stuff you communicate about yourself and the stuff you communicate despite yourself. Our job is to build great brands and use the power of branding to deliver the services that we promise. Because when it comes to branding, you are either distinctive or you are extinct. So if you don't stand out, we will bury you. So how do you do it? Let's share some ideas with you. One is about clarity. There must be a clarity about what you stand for. What is it that you are delivering? What is it that you are promising? Because as I said, a brand is a promise made and a promise delivered. So branding is about creating emotional connections. It's not about having a beautiful office, having the nice logo, having beautiful packaging and all those. Do you know, the guys at Harley Davidson were asked the question, why is it that everybody likes a Harley Davidson? They say every African who becomes rich and has got a tar road wants to buy a Harley Davidson because they want to show they've arrived. And they went to the guys at Harley Davidson in Milwaukee where we went to school, and they said to them, what is it that you sell? What's that special thing, that brand you sell of motorbikes? I said, but we don't sell motorbikes at Harley Davidson. We don't sell those things. They said, what we sell is the ability of a 43-year-old accountant to dress in black leather, to ride through small towns and have people be very afraid. They said, we sell feelings. So now you understand that branding has got nothing to do with logos. It's got everything to do with how they feel when they interact with your business. Second, you got to communicate. Because, you know, as Michael Goldhaber says, in times past, you could be obscure, yet secure. Now it's much harder. You just have to stand out these days. You have to stand out in terms of what you deliver, and you have to use some of the tools that we are now taking for granted. Twitter. I don't know whether Twitter has saved people's lives or Twitter has messed up people's lives. We should just check with Donald Trump, because Twitter has done things. You know, Twitter can be your best friend, and it could be your biggest enemy. We need to deliver. Most importantly, we need to deliver. You know, people like to say, our employees are the greatest assets. So then I think we should stop any of these things we sell and just put them on sale. You know, this is what we are used to in the companies and the countries we work for. You know, and I'm using a lot of public service examples because a lot of the utilities in the continent are owned and run by the public service. So you can imagine what happens is that we end up being you want to see your friend? I can see him says to me, oh, wait, I want to see my friend. Oh. When we don't deliver, they just keep moving. You know, Africans are amazing. They keep complaining, but nobody is prepared to do something about it. Instead, they're like, oh, just let them. I'd rather drive through potholes. I'm not going to ask the government to fix them. Electricity doesn't work. I'm just going to light up a fire. Don't worry, but we'll pay their salary, we'll pay their tax so that they can keep coming back to work. We'll put them on retirement for 3 months and bring them back again. Do you know, customers quit us. It's a mess, isn't it? It's a mess, isn't it? It's like a utility here in South Africa. You know, 70% of the perceptions that people have are determined by the interactions they have with the people. You know, if you look across categories, you will see that what drives brands, what drives service, is the interactions with the people and the product. Just two things. Do you love what Sam Walton says? He says, there is only one boss, the customer. And she can fire everybody in the company from the chairman on down simply by spending the money elsewhere. You know, we are lucky in this continent that a majority of our utilities are run by governments, and that citizens in the continent have given up their job to hold governments accountable. We are lucky. But the continent is not lucky, because then it means we are always going to be dependent on the rest of the world to bail us out. You know, they say, Bain & Company released a survey that says 80% of companies believe they are delivering a superior customer service, but only 8% of their customers agree. You know, somebody said the other day, somebody flew SAA the other day, my beloved airline. You know, I love SAA. I'm lifetime platinum on SAA, so you can imagine I've flown enough SAA, and I've flown enough any other airline. And they said, and she was complaining some celebrity, Bonang, and she says, I hate the food from Joburg to Cape Town. And they said, but other people like it. How can that be a solution to her problem? How could that be a solution to her problem? Customer service, remember, the customer experience is their perception. Because remember, some people like to say, oh, that's just what you think. Well, that is exactly how you build your brand. Make them think and believe and feel that you are delivering. Your big building and your big Mercedes-Benz acting like a king is not delivering. Because when you are delivering, you get 12% return on sales, you get 6% premium gain on your market share, and you can charge what you want. How do you explain people are willing to buy a fake Louis Vuitton bag for a premium? Because it makes them feel like they have arrived. They go to Hermes and they don't ask for a discount. And they know that Hermes thing is not good quality, but it's Hermes. Because you know, what customers do in the private sector and what they do in the public sector needs to be looked at. We need to encourage customers to do in the public sector what they do in the private sector. Because in the private sector, they will put up a billboard, they will take the money somewhere else. And only then will governments be the only language that government seems to understand is when people start destroying the very goods or the poor goods that they've put out there. Those very poor garbage delivery services, the poor electricity services, the poor energy services that we put out there, the only time we listen and understand is when the customers destroy them. That should not be how it's done. We should not get to a situation where the people are saying, out with the leadership. But that's exactly what they do in the private sector. So you can see Africans are no longer willing to accept mediocrity, which many of us deliver to them. Remember what a customer is. I love what Gandhi says. The customer is the most important visitor on our premises. He's not dependent on us. We are dependent on him. He is not an interruption to our work. He is a purpose for it. He is not an outsider in our business. He is a part of it. We are not doing him a favor by serving him. He's doing us a favor by giving us an opportunity to do so. Without a customer, we will not exist. Our brands will not exist. Our businesses will not exist. Because customer service is the key vehicle of building our brands. Your brand is how you deliver to your customers. The fourth way you're going to build your brand is patriotism. You've got to love your country. You've got to love your continent. Because, I think Fela Kuti once says, if you can't identify with Africa, then you will never have an identity. Many of us are very quick to go out here and show people just how international we are, how beautiful the brands we support from out of the continent are. We take our money in suitcases, we get in aeroplanes, we are very happy to go build a house at Chelsea in London, and we think we've arrived. Arrived is when your neighborhood is better than the one in Chelsea. Our job is to love our country, to love our continent, because the countries with the highest GDPs are the countries with the highest brands. I love what our former South African company used to say. They used to say, it is the SA that makes us who we are. So think about many utility companies in the public service. Many of them start with our countries, with our country's letters. So imagine the pride that you need to build in there, or the responsibility that you have when the brand that you are driving has got your country's name into it. 5, it's about alignment. It's about ensuring that experience, what you offer, is aligned with the image that you want to project out there. It's about ensuring that you have the capabilities to do what it is that you're doing. You're building those capabilities. It's about ensuring that people behave in the way that you want them to deliver the brand. And behavior is all about values. Some of our leaders are despicable. They sleep with their PAs. They steal your money. They don't pitch up for work. They think they are kings. They want us to bow down to them, whereas they should be bowing down to us. Because whether they're in the private sector, without our money, without our custom, without us buying the products and the services, they are nothing. Those companies do not exist. And in the public service, without our tax money, no government can survive. Our job is to understand that the set of values we espouse builds the types of behavior we want to see in our continent and in our companies. Do you know, Mark Hayward obviously gave flowers to his PA, slept with the PA. I don't understand. I think it happens in America as well. And, clearly they let him go, and they said he has demonstrated a profound lack of judgment that seriously undermined his credibility and damaged his effectiveness in leading HP, and he agreed. You know, unlike many of our African leaders, when he agreed, he moved on. Ours, when they don't agree, they change the constitution. Alignment is about ensuring that what you think, what you do, and what you feel are all aligned. Your heart, your hands, and your heart are all aligned. 6th is about collaboration. I don't understand this continent, how we're going to move forward when we are only working with each other 12 to 15%. If you look at the rest of Europe, they are investing in each other 40 to 70%. Why do you think Euro is all about? Don't worry about Brexit. They're going to be suffering in a couple of weeks, those British. Why do you think Macron won? Macron won at 65% or whatever, because they didn't understand the Le Pen business. They say, Le Pen, are you mad? I want to be able to work in Spain. I want to be able to work in London. I want to move goods. I want to make it easy to move around. But for us to prosper as a continent, part of what we are going to need to do is to understand that if ESCOM has got best practices in South Africa, how do we take those best learnings to another country, to Zambia, to Zimbabwe, to Nigeria, to all those? And if Zambia has got other best practices in something else, how do we work together as people? How do we work together as countries? How do we work together as industries? Clusters of industries. Seventh, in closing, it's about leadership. It's about leadership. You know, I know what leadership is to us. We take a bunch of people, our staff, we go away on a weekend, and we say, let's go team building. We make the poor fools walk on fire. We make them do bungee jumping. We make them build sand castles. And we say, we are building a team. Have you ever come across anybody who's been through this rubbish, coming back on Monday and doing something different with their life and with their company? Leadership. If I say Martin Luther King, if I say John Lennon, if I say Steve Jobs, if I say Einstein, you know what they stand for. You know exactly what they stand for. Do not be disappointed in Trump. We knew who he was going in. We know who he is going out as he is now. What you don't want, folks, you don't want to be the best of the best. You want to be considered as the only one who do what you do. And finally, what are you thinking going global? What are you thinking about staying here in this continent? Remember what Kwame Nkrumah says, we face neither east, we face neither west, we face forward, because Africa is the future.